For decades, the pyramid builders of the Old Kingdom were a genetic mystery. We had their monuments, but their DNA was thought to be lost, long baked into molecular dust by the Saharan sun. But in 2025, a landmark study published in Nature revealed the DNA of one of the pyramid builders, or at least close relative of one of them. Scientists had successfully sequenced the oldest Egyptian genome in history, and it revealed a civilization that was far more connected than we ever thought possible. Hi, I'm Krutik. I have a PhD in genetics, and today we're going to be examining the oldest known DNA ever found from ancient Egypt. A team led by Adeline Moraes-Jacobs published a paper in Nature. They successfully sequenced the first ever whole genome from the Old Kingdom. This is the Nuwayrat Man, otherwise known as specimen NUE001. We're going to call this dude the Nuwayrat Man for this video. Now, let's set a bit of a timeline to understand who this Nuwayrat bloke really was, and why his DNA is so significant for us to understand the population structure of ancient Egypt. At 3150 BCE, that's over 5,000 years ago, Egypt is first unified under a single pharaoh. Then, fast forward around 300 years, at 2855 BCE, the Nuwayrat Man is estimated to have been born. Fast forward a little bit longer, and at 2630 BCE, the first ever step pyramid is built for King Djoser. And 100 years later, the Great Pyramid of Khufu is built. Based on radiocarbon dating, the Nuwayrat Man, who was alive during the exact window when Egypt was transforming from a collection of villages and city-states into the world's first true superpower. His DNA can help us to bridge the gap between the early dynasty and the Old Kingdom. Before this, the oldest reliable DNA was from around 1400 BCE, and the Nuwayrat Man, he's 1200 years older than that. That's a leap that's longer than a millennium. Just to add a bit more detail onto this, at this point, he's the closest we have ever come to understanding the genetic code of the pyramid builders themselves. And this is my last point to emphasize this, we don't have another set of DNA for a specimen who lived as close to the constructions of the pyramids from Egypt. Now let's talk about this bloke a little bit further. The specimen was found in Nuwayrat, near the famous cliffs of Beni Hassan. He lived between 2855 and 2570 BCE. He was buried in a rock-cut tomb inside of a massive ceramic vessel. This burial style is usually reserved for elites. However, his bones also tell us a story. He was between 44 and 64 years at the age of his death, but his spine was ravaged by severe osteoarthritis, and his teeth were ground down. Despite his fancy tomb, his body showed signs of wear and tear from grueling physical labor. Maybe he helped in the pyramids or other construction projects. Regardless, based on his burial, he was no ordinary person. He had some level of wealth of status in ancient Egypt. When we look into his DNA, based on a principal component analysis map, the results are quite striking. The North African Foundation. About 78% of his DNA traces back to North Africa, specifically North African Neolithic populations, similar to several groups already found in Morocco. His bedrock is what we think of as indigenous North African. And there was a Mesopotamian connection. Interestingly, 22% of his DNA comes from the Eastern Fertile Crescent. That's Neolithic Mesopotamia, or modern-day Iraq, Iran. This means that by the time of the first dynasties, Egypt wasn't an isolated island in the desert. There was a massive gene flow from the east. People weren't just trading pots and grain, they were migrating, settling, and starting families. And to be clear, this is the first evidence we have of gene flow between ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia, the two juggernauts of the early Bronze Age, which is pretty cool. So, how does this change our view of the late Bronze Age collapse? The Nuwayrat Man lived before the peak of the Egyptian Empire. By contrasting his genome with later mummies from the Third Intermediate period, we can see how Egypt has changed over several millennia and into the modern day. After the Bronze Age collapse and subsequent Canaanite expansions, Egypt saw a massive wave of Levanite ancestry. The Nuwayrat genetic code, if we can call it that, began to blend with waves of people coming from the north and the south, specifically the Levant, modern-day Israel and Palestine, and sub-Saharan Africa. Moving into modern times, most Egyptians today carry between 32 and 74% of this Nuwayrat-like ancestry, which is quite a range. Close to 5,000 years of influx from the Levant, sub-Saharan African, Roman and Arabanization, I think that's a word, have changed the landscape of Egypt quite dramatically. But the connection to the pyramid builders is still there, based on this Nuwayrat man's genome. Though it's diluted, the modern Egyptians are very much direct ancestors of the pyramid builders. The Nuwayrat Man was preserved because of how he was buried. In a ceramic pot, a microenvironment that protected his DNA for 4,500 years. Because of this one bloke, we know a little bit more about the golden age of the most spectacular civilization that has ever existed. I've been Krutik. Follow the channel on X, hit the bell for notifications, and check out the pinned comment to see other videos on subjects similar to this. Ancient DNA is awesome, and that's what we do on this channel. And please subscribe. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Thank you for watching, and see you next time for more science.